Welcome into the Full Tilt Devy podcast where we tilt so you don't have to. I'm your host, Dynasty Coach A. I'm joined as always by Andy at AStarFF on Twitter. And tonight we're going to be covering a little bit of news and then diving into some of the Big 12 and the ACC players that we love and love to hate. But first of all, how are you doing tonight, Andy?
I'm doing great. AStarFF on Twitter. I'm just happy football's back, man. I got the Patriots and Giants on in the background. It just feels so good to be back. You know, June and July are brutal months for what we do, but it's good to see some actual, players on the field making some plays and hopefully seeing some of those late round rookie picks come to fruition here for you.
And speaking of which, we actually have some real news. There's a little bit of goings on in the college world. Did you want to go ahead and start off with Hudson Card taking first team reps? Does that scare you at all? With Quinn Ewers is the hottest thing ever in college football for about a year now, and so it's got to be a little scary that Card's still getting those first team reps.
I would say, initially, I was worried 1% that Hudson Card was going to be a thing. Now it's at 5%. So still, I'm not really concerned about it. I think Ewers still has that job. I think this is just Sarkisian playing some games with the media, doing some coach speak, trying to make it seem like there's more of a competition than there really is. I think it's still Ewers' job to lose. He said, Sarkisian has said great things about both of them. He's excited about both of them, he said. And I think it's just, in what he wants to do is just to leave it up to, he did the same thing with Hudson Card and Casey Thompson last year. He waited till the day of the season the day of the game, basically, to announce Hudson Card was going to be a starter. I think he's going to wait till about the week before and say Quinn is the starter here. So it's just a lot of smoke and mirrors at this point for me. But it is a little concerning that he's still getting the first team reps. But I don't think there's too much to read into because Quinn Ewers is still getting a lot of reps in practice as well.
Yeah, and I think Hudson Card was a good prospect, like a really good prospect actually. And so it's not like he's just some nobody or anything like that. Now, he didn't really do big things in the few games that he started and played in last year. Obviously, injuries involved and stuff like that. But I think I don't think it's all that unbelievable that they want to get him some reps because obviously injuries and things like that do happen in season. And for him to at least have some of those reps with the ones is going to help a lot, kind of like NFL teams, where people are freaking out about Isaiah Pacheco getting runs with the one right now. And it's well, yeah, they want to mix in some of these players. You're helping your other players or your stud players, take time off, not have so much wear and tear, especially with the running backs. But even going back to the QBs, just having the flow and the gelling with the offense. Because what if Ewers were to go down? When it's all said and done, I really do think that Ewers is going to be the starting QB. But I think they have big hopes and dreams in Texas with everything they're doing with NIL and everything else. So once again, if Ewers were to go down, they need to have somebody that can step in there and not. Without a hitch and not have any issues and just be oh, well, our season's over at this point.
Yeah. And, like you said, Hudson Card didn't play the greatest last year. He got, some injuries and Casey Thompson basically took the job away from him, but he's not a bad player. Like you said, he's a highly regarded recruit. And then they also have Malik Murphy on their roster too, a true freshman who, as far as reports that I've seen, he's having fun there too. Obviously, Arch Manning's going to come in next year, and that room's just going to be crazy crowded. But for now, I think it's just Ewers is probably the guy, but get as many reps as you can with these other guys too, just in case, like you said.
Yeah, I think so. I think, maybe even give it a week. We don't have that much time before we get into actual football here. So I think give it another week and we'll really start to see, okay, Quinn Ewers is our starter and that kind of thing. I don't know why he's necessarily playing these games. Like you said, he does it in the past or he's done it in the past, but
right.
It just seems silly. I mean, Ewers is such a great prospect, whether obviously he hasn't done anything on the field yet, but it's like, what are you doing? Unless he just looks terrible in practice, then what are we really doing here, guys?
Right, and that hasn't been the case. He's practiced well too. So, yeah, I think it's a nothing burger as of right now. But it's we gotta talk about it.
Exactly. Jamie Perogue says, I'm stoked to see Arch Manning play and see how his NFL career pans out. Well, you have a lot of time before any of that happens. So let's stick with yours in Hudson Card for now. But I too am excited to see what can actually happen with Arch Manning, or what will happen. And then I don't know if you saw, but there's actually talks of Arch Manning hasn't 100% made up his decision yet, and all that kind of stuff. And I mean, I guess people are probably always going to speculate like that, but I don't care. Like he's already made his decision as far as I'm concerned. Obviously, people can change their minds, but until that actually happens, I'm not going to sit here and speculate on it.
Right.
So, excuse me. Now, obviously, we have our first major injury of the season as well, and it wasn't even on the field. But with Sam Hartman going down, unfortunately, we don't even know a lot of what happened. From what I read, he had a workout, and then he after the workout, he went to practice and just wasn't feeling right. Something wasn't feeling right. There's really very little details beyond that, so I don't know exactly what happened. If he hurt himself while working out or what, but. It sounds like he's going to miss most, if not all, of the season. Do you have any Hartman shares, or or how do you feel about this losing him for the season?
I don't think I have any Hartman shares actually, which is kind of surprising now that I think about it. But yeah, it was a weird story there. You hope that it's nothing too serious. Obviously, when you hear non-football injury and out for the year, your mind goes 1,000 different places. So yeah, hope for the best for Sam Hartman. But as far as we're concerned from a fantasy standpoint, I think it affects obviously Hartman, who, some people were talking about potentially being a first round quarterback next year. Not a lot of people, but his name was brought up in that conversation. But I think it also affects the wide receivers there. I think a lot of people are excited about A.T. Perry and Donovan Green this year. And I think now they've announced that Mitch Griffiths is going to take his place as a starter. And, he's a guy that doesn't really have any statistics to his name and in his collegiate career as of yet. A 3-star guy, kind of undersized. He was only 6 foot, 180 pounds. So, you worry about the passing game there and the entire offense, really. Especially, with these receivers, A.T. Perry and Donovan Green. I think those guys were getting somewhat of a Devy buzz around them. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, you just hope for the best for Sam Hartman. But, and it does kind of affect, residually some of these guys in that Wake Forest offense.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, he was somebody that a lot of people were excited about, but then beyond that, like you said, there was a lot of other offensive members or offensive pieces that people were getting excited about that probably aren't going to do every little piece that they were able to do or going to be able to do, before. So I definitely agree with that. Another QB battle that we that we have here on the show sheet is looking at Jackson Dart and Altmaier, and honestly, I am probably, or I guess there's some news that Altmaier is actually being more consistent than Jackson Dart, and that doesn't surprise me in the slightest. I'm not a Jackson Dart fan by any means. I want nothing to do with Jackson Dart, and I mean I feel like if you can't put up decent numbers in the Pac-12, how in the hell are you going to put up anything in a different conference?
Yeah, I think. Yeah, I'm with you. I've never been a big Jackson Dart guy. I think he's getting way overdrafted. He has been since his freshman year, and a lot of that has to do with some of the guys in the Devy community, which is fine. Everyone's right and wrong. He's still a good player, but I think if Altmaier wins that job, then where's Dart going now? Second, third round in startups. It's going to tank his value. So if you have Dart now, I would be trying to sell him, honestly, for whatever you can get at this point. Not, I'm not saying go and get peanuts for him because he still holds some value, but um, I would be worried. And Altmaier, for what it's worth, kind of the same as the Hudson Card situation. He was a good recruit coming out too, and I believe he was a mid-tier 4-star.
Yep.
Played a year behind Matt Corral, or I think this is his second year. It's either the second or third year. But yeah, he's a good player as well. So I think this kind of vindicates some of my Jackson Dart takes, which always feels good. But other than that, as far as like the offense is concerned, I don't think it really changes much. Zach Evans is going to still be the main running back there. Michael Triggs and Jalen Robinson seem like they're probably like the biggest threats in the passing game there. But I think as far as Jackson Dart's concerned, I'd be a little bit skittish about keeping him on your roster moving forward.
Yeah, and obviously you get into the nerdy stuff like I do with the metrics and everything, and when you're once again going back to the Pac-12, like when you're talking about a QB in the Pac-12 that can't even hardly get or can't even get 7 yards or adjusted yards per attempt, like that's not good. If you're talking about like the SEC or even the ACC or whatever, maybe I can give it to you. I can give you some credit there. But in the Pac-12, you should be 9, 10, 11, 12 yards per attempt, or at least adjusted yards per attempt there. And he just didn't do it. He had a high interception rate. Just nothing looked great. And then I never understood the love that he was getting. Like, oh, just because Matt Corral left and there's an opening there, that all of a sudden this guy's going to become good. Like, that's not how this works. That's not how any of this works. And so it doesn't surprise me in the slightest that Luke Altmaier is taking over, or possibly taking over, or at least looking better in camp. It really doesn't surprise me. Now, when it's all said and done, they brought Jackson Dart in. It wouldn't be crazy for him to start and all that, but I wouldn't feel confident with him at any point. So even if he does win the job, like you said, I'd be trying to move him off of any team that I have, even if you want to wait until hopefully he starts like week 1, week 2, whatever, and maybe even has like a decent game, and then you go ahead and move him then, because I don't think he's ever going to be anything for NFL purposes. And if, we're strictly talking Devy, that's all we care about. So, why is he on your team at that point?
Right. No, I totally agree.
So, once again, we're here. We're very close to the season starting, and so we're actually starting to get some news and things like this. I can't wait for all of this stuff to come out. Hopefully, we'll actually get some like true depth charts and who the starters are and all that here in the next week or two. But it is kind of cool to see. I've started seeing little blurbs here and there, like from this practice and that practice, and I love. I wasn't all in last year on. On Devy and C2C and all that kind of stuff. So like as I'm getting more involved with it, it's just, I love seeing all of that kind of stuff. But why don't we go ahead and, since it's just us, I guess I'll go ahead and host the game. But why don't we go ahead and dive into one of our games here? And it's the over-under game. It's the Brian Kelly edition, because we're talking about his new team and his old flame, and LSU and Notre Dame. And so I wasn't even trying to rhyme, but hey, that's how good I am.
That was good. I appreciate that.
So why don't we go ahead and start off with the new hotness in LSU, with only 6.5 wins set as the line there. How are you feeling about that line, and which way are you going?
So yeah, obviously LSU, they got their new coach, Brian Kelly, obviously. New QB, kind of a mystery at this point. There's talks about Miles Brennan, maybe Jaden Daniels, who transferred in from Arizona State, or maybe Garrett Nussmeier, true sophomore or redshirt freshman.
So I drafted all 3 of them in my
just in case
league, though. Just in case, I drafted Jaden Daniels at like round 27, and then I drafted Nussmeier in round 35 or 32, and then I drafted what was the other one? I can't even think of his name now. But I drafted the third one. Miles Brennan. I drafted Miles Brennan in round 41.
I feel like Brennan probably has the best shot of being a starter. So,
hey, round 41 out of a 45 round league, I'll take it.
but yeah, so the offense looks a lot different. Even the backfield, they lost Tyrion Davis Price to the NFL, and Corey Kiner transferred to Cincinnati. So it leaves John Emery, who's had a couple of good seasons, but he was injured or academically ineligible last year. Um, so he's potentially going to be the lead back. You got Armani Goodwin and then a Penn State transfer, Noah Kane, in the mix there as well. On defense, they returned a potential top 5 draft pick in BJ Ojolari, who did lead the team in sacks, but they do lose Derek Stingley Jr. from the secondary. So 6.5 wins. So where are they going to find 7 to hit the over? So I have them at 4 wins versus Florida State, versus Southern, versus New Mexico, and versus UAB. I have 5 definite losses on the schedule for them. And these might, I guess there's potential for them to beat Florida, but it's in Gainesville. And I just, they've lost so much on offense. I just don't see them being competitive. So I have Florida as a loss. Also Tennessee, Ole Miss, and then Alabama and Texas A&M are the obvious ones. So that would mean, so they have the 4 easy wins. That would mean they wouldn't need to win all 3 of the rest of their games. They have Mississippi State, at Auburn, and at Arkansas. Fun stat about Brian Kelly: he's only had 1 season under 7 wins since 2006, and that was his final year at Central Michigan, which was years ago. But he's never played in the SEC before, and I don't think he can muster 7 wins in that schedule. So I don't think there's a chance they hit 7. I would be smashing the under on that and locking it in right now.
Wow, I actually thought this was pretty easy, the opposite direction.
Really?
Their schedule is so easy to start, and then they go through like a murderer's row in the middle. So like I'm with you. Like they do not have an easy middle part of the schedule. But I mean, like looking at they start off with Florida State. Like I'm sorry, Florida State ain't beating anybody.
Yeah. No, Florida State's trash.
Yeah, Southern U, Mississippi State, I guess. I mean, whatever. I don't know.
Yeah.
New Mexico, Auburn. Like when was Auburn good? Like last. It's been a minute, right? And then Tennessee. Like Tennessee is probably the first one. Like I would legit think that like would give them a run for their money. If anything, I would say that Tennessee probably wins. But I gave them losses for Tennessee, Florida, Ole Miss, Alabama. But then I mean you get into Arkansas, UAB, and then Texas A&M. Like I think there's some winnable games somewhere in there. Like obviously the middle part of the season is going to be extremely tough, but to get to 7, you're telling me they can't beat Arkansas? Like who does Arkansas have anymore?
I mean, they return KJ Jefferson. They lose Treylon Burks, so I mean, the offense is going to be a little bit.
They're starting. We already talked about Jaden Hazelwood and how we don't like him. So, like, if that's who they're starting, then who the hell are they going to use to beat LSU?
I mean, all right. So LSU has Ojolari on defense. I guess like I said, Brian Kelly is one of those guys who can come in and like make a team win. But I just feel like this SEC schedule. Like you said, we both have the same losses: Tennessee, Florida, Ole Miss, Alabama, and Texas A&M. We both have the same wins, I guess. I think Mississippi State could be tricky. You never know what Mike Leach, his offense, is going to pull out. They got good players there: Joquavius Marks and I can't think. Their quarterback right now his name's escaping me. Max something maybe.
Oh, Max Johnson.
Doesn't matter. I don't think it's Max Johnson.
Sorry, I was completely focused on the schedule.
Mississippi State's quarterback.
Oh, Mississippi State.
Be right.
Oh man, yeah. I know what you're talking about now. I can't think of his name either.
Will Rogers.
Thank you. Yeah.
I got there.
You said Max, and all I could think of was Max Johnson at that point.
No. Will Rogers. Anyway, so yeah, Mississippi State could beat them. Auburn, probably not. They're kind of a mess, but it is at Auburn, and then Arkansas, I think they're a decent team. I think they could, beat this LSU team who's kind of like in a rebuilding phase. So I think 6 wins is kind of their ceiling.
I guess. I mean, it's a team in flux, so like I can't really truly argue with you. I just really think they're going to start off 5-0, and then at that point they already have their 7 wins. So like
I
it's
mean, that they have 5 wins there, but I think you're right. They absolutely could start 5-0, but then they go Tennessee, Florida, Ole Miss, Alabama, Arkansas. They don't get
I
respite
just
until
really
like
I
week.
really think they're going to beat Arkansas and UAB. I mean, or at the
Right.
very least they're going to like
Yeah,
they're
they'll
going to
beat
have a
UAB.
shot. Yeah, but they're going to have a shot against Florida. They're going to have a shot against Tennessee. Like I don't think it's impossible for them to win one of those games, but I wasn't even giving them those games. I just really think, I don't know. I get what you're saying, but maybe it's not as much of a smash as I originally thought.
Hey, it
So
could happen. Like I said, Brian Kelly always hits 7 wins, so you might be right.
and Nino Brown underscore T2T once says, "Go Eagles." Thoughts on Jerkovich, Zay Flowers, and Garwo? If you know anything about me, I love me some Zay Flowers. I drafted him in my most recent C2C. I drafted him in my only other Devy draft. So like I love me some Zay Flowers. If you're asking for Devy purposes, I really don't want anything to do with Jerkovic. And like I think he's very good for Zay Flowers. I don't think he's going to be this like amazing QB or anything like that. And then I don't know too much about Garwo. How do you feel about him?
I think he went over 1,000 yards last year. He's got decent size. I think he's entering his 5th season. Um, so I'm not really too high on Garwo, but he's a effective running back in the ACC. I think he could potentially end up being a day 3 draft pick next year. But that's about
Really?
it. But I'm with you on Zay Flowers. I've liked him since last offseason. I think he kind of had a disappointing year with Jerkovic getting hurt all season last year up until the end when he came back finally. So if Jerk stays healthy all year, I think that's a solid 1-2 punch. I think both of them could potentially be day 2 draft picks, even Jerkovic. Honestly, I don't know if he'll be a first round draft pick, but I could definitely see him being a second or third round.
Yeah, I can see that. Like, I think he'll be in the NFL. I just don't. I'm not like
Yeah.
overly excited about him or anything like that. Enough about the tangent. Let's get into Notre Dame and how we feel about this one. So I think you smashed the over on this one. By the way, the over under is 8.5 wins, and I think 9 wins is like the low here, like the expectation. So I really don't understand necessarily why it's even being set at 8.5 here. Obviously, they were like a top 5 team, top 10, whatever they were last year. Things can drastically change. I understand that, but I don't know about you, but I'm a pretty big Tyler Buckner fan, or at least I'm becoming one after I drafted him in my C2C league once again. So, there's even some players. I'm not trying to only talk about the players that I'm drafting on my C2C team, but I also drafted Audric Estime, who was a true freshman last year. And if you've never seen a picture of him, go look at a picture of him because that dude is a stud. He makes Branson Robinson look like he needs to go like eat some Wheaties or something like that. So, yeah, I think there's some exciting parts. Even getting into the wide receivers and things. Some of these players on that offense are going to be very exciting. And I just think if you look at their schedule, which I'm bringing up as we speak, then they're going to lose week 1. Like, I'm sorry, it's just probably, I'd say there's a 99.9% chance that they're going to lose week 1. But then after that, you go into Marshall, California, UNC, which I mean, I love me some Drake May and all that, but that's another team in flux after losing Sam Howell and a lot of pieces recently. BYU, they're not going to lose to BYU. Stanford, UNLV, Syracuse, Clemson, Navy, Boston, like Boston College, USC, like where are they losing games? I just don't understand. It's like the easiest schedule ever.
Yeah. No, I'm with you here. I don't know if it's a smash, but I'm definitely taking the over. So Marcus Freeman obviously is taking over for Brian Kelly. He was the D coordinator there. We're kind of all in agreement that Buckner's going to be the quarterback. There's still some talk about potentially Drew Pine, but I don't think that's going to happen. Big losses on offense are obviously Kyron Williams, who is still running the 40-yard dash, I'm told, as well as leading receiver Kevin Austin. But they do get back the All-American tight end Michael Mayer. I wouldn't say I'm overly confident in this offense, but they do have some dynamic playmakers. I think Tobias Merriweather, the true freshman, could make some plays this year. Lorenzo Styles is obviously getting some hype. I think Buckner is kind of the best situation here for them as far as making an electric offense. I think he's got a little bit more arm talent than Drew Pine. And as far as Kyron Williams being gone, Chris Tyree and Logan Diggs, and then like you mentioned, Audric Estime, they're gonna fill in that role pretty easily. They all have different skill sets, but they're all very talented. The defense, on the other hand, doesn't really have any question marks. They finished 13th in the nation in sacks, and they bring their top 3 sack leaders back from 2021. So I'm looking at the schedule. I have 6 wins for them right off the bat. Marshall, Stanford, UNLV, Syracuse, Navy, and Boston College. Ohio State should be a loss on the road, but I don't know if it is a definite loss. We've seen last year Ohio State came out a little rusty against Minnesota, and then again lost to Oregon in back-to-back weeks. If Mo Ibrahim didn't go down at halftime with that Achilles injury, there's a chance that Minnesota could have beat them last year too. So it depends on what their state of mind is coming out. Like Stroud's obviously got a year under his belt. He's going to be a little bit more calm back there, but they might win that game. So that leaves 4 more games. They've got the 6 wins. So 4 games against Cal at home, BYU neutral site in Las Vegas, Clemson at home, and USC on the road. They need to win 3 out of 4 of those to hit 9. I think they can do it. I think Cal at home should be a win. BYU neutral site, no problem. Clemson, who knows who their quarterback's even going to be at that point in the season. I think that's a win. And USC, they've got all the changes there too. It is on the road. It is the last game of the season. Could be tricky, but I think they could win 3 of them and hit 9 wins. So I'm taking the over.
Yeah, I just think it's too easy. I get that there's changes and everything, but I think a lot of people are excited about Lorenzo Styles as well. So I think there is something to be said about what that offense could be if everything starts to click. And beyond the, I guess, like you said, maybe it's a good thing that you get Ohio State week 1 because it's probably not going to be as much clicking. I mean, yes, Ohio State's going to be Ohio State. Like, they're going to be a great team. But they did lose Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave on the offensive side. And so, while they have very good wide receivers coming behind them, they might not all click. That might not all work week 1. And so it's probably the best time to hit that, although Notre Dame has a lot changing as well. But regardless, I think that you can pretty easily smash the 9 there, and I think we're both in agreement here. So go ahead and make that bet. I'd say take the life savings out and just throw it all on the over at that point. It's just guaranteed smash at this point. But why don't we go ahead and take a quick little break, and we'll be right back. We'll dive into the Big 12.
I don't think there's a good situation where I see Robinson really taking away from ETN seriously this year. And I think that's why Snoop Connor is a great last round pick in fantasy, because there's a real chance that Snoop Connor is there's a real chance that James Robinson goes in week 1 or this preseason, plays 2 snaps, comes out, and we don't see him again for this season. They come out, put him on IR, we don't talk about him again.
I'm really starting to think that Snoop Connor is only getting run because of his name. I do kind of agree with Billy there that he has opportunity, but man, he did not do a lot in college. Let's just put it that way.
I mean, speaking of Ole Miss running backs, Jerry and Ely, he's been getting all sorts of he's playing wide receiver, everything in training camp over with the Chiefs. So name to look out for.
Yeah, I really like that. I love Ely as a talent. He obviously didn't get the draft capital that we were hoping for, but there was some stuff going on there. But enough about those guys. Let's go ahead and dive into the Big 12, and we're going to be doing just like last time. We're going to be doing our favorite player, and that's in air quotes, kind of up for discussion on why they're your favorite player. We're not just talking about like the number one ranked player or anything like that. Then a player that we think will go up in value, and then a player that we think will fall and lose value, whether it's soon or by the end of the year or whenever. And so why don't you go ahead and start us off with your Big 12 favorite player?
So I went with Xavier Hutchinson, wide receiver from Iowa State. He's a JUCO kid, and I love my JUCO guys. He came over in 2020 from junior college. He's had two decent seasons. He's gotten over 25% market share both years he's been there. This will obviously be his fifth year. He loses quarterback Brock Purdy, who did get drafted this year, Mr. Irrelevant. But I think this offense is going to be more pass reliant now that they also lose Breece Hall. I do worry a bit about his athleticism, Hutchinson, that is. He played about 80% of his snaps lined up out wide, but his ADOT was only 7.5 yards. Could be because Purdy was one of the more conservative quarterbacks in the country last year. But I'm interested to see how he does with Hunter Deckers. I think Hunter Deckers likes to sling it a little bit more. So, yeah, I mean, if he gets another big season, 25, 30% market share, he's got the size. He can, play the edge of the field. I think he's a guy that, could end up being like a late day 2 pick potentially.
Yeah, I like it. I have him in like the 50s as far as like overall wide receivers, and I think when you're considering a super senior, that's pretty good. There's not too many super seniors that are going to be in that range. Most of them are probably going to be, closer to like the 80s, 90s, and 100s and things like that, just because they've had their chance. So that shows you that like he's at least doing something, and making it. He's putting something onto the field that's making the model and everything notice him at the very least. But I'm with you. We've discussed how we don't think that Breece Hall is going to get replaced this year as far as like his talent and his production, and so that the offense is going to have to change. And so they could pass more. That could be really good for him. And while he's probably not ever going to be like, I even think that like becoming a late day 2 pick might be a stretch, but if he could be a 4th round pick, 5th round pick, something like that, I think you're still fairly happy with where you're getting him in drafts right now. So I don't hate it. I guess there's always the chance he could be. I mean, we've seen Velus Jones and even like Tyquan Thornton and guys like that go pretty damn early this draft. So it's not impossible that he could be a 3rd round pick. I guess I wouldn't be betting on it at this point, but once again, crazier things have happened.
No, I'm with you there. I mean, I think that would be like his ceiling, range of outcomes. More than likely, day 3, or maybe even undrafted. But yeah, he's an intriguing guy. He's got the size. I think we'll see how he does this year with like we talked about. The offense is going to look a little different. Maybe that helps him out.
Yeah, I think he would, at the very least, he could be a good campus pick in a C2C draft. Get you one good year of campus production, and then possibly still be something on the NFL side as well. But for Devy purposes, definitely worth a dart throw there in a deeper league. I'm not doing like your normal like 5-person or 5-round Devy draft or anything like that. But definitely a later name to know for sure.
Right.
For my favorite player, I went ahead and picked Kendre Miller out of TCU. I have fallen in love with him recently. I just think that he has like every opportunity ahead of him. He's 6 foot, 206 pounds, maybe not that like ideal prototypical size, but good enough. But some of the things that I look at with running backs is like PPR points per touch. He had 1.4 PPR points per touch, which is like the highest of the high. Not like maybe not the highest in the nation or anything like that, but it's pretty damn good for somebody that had like a somewhat solid amount of touches last year. He had 76 scrimmage yards per game that he averaged and a 7.4% big time run rate, which is a metric that I've talked about substantially already on this podcast. So, we know that I love to see all that. And that was with Zach Evans, on the field. And now we no longer have Zach Evans. So I feel like, why wouldn't you fall in love with Kendre Miller now?
Yeah, I'm with you. I think he honestly played better than Zach Evans towards the end of the year there. I did have some concerns initially because they had Traylon Smith, the Arkansas running back, who was going to go there. He has since changed his mind and went to Texas San Antonio. And then Amani Bailey, who I believe is from Louisiana, he's also transferred there. But, they got to replace Zach Evans, on the depth chart. I think Kendre Miller still is probably, he's still the most talented one on the roster there. So, yeah, I like it. I think he's one of these, 2022, or I should say 2023 running backs that are kind of getting swept under the rug when you start, hear about the, Bijan Robinsons and Jahmyr Gibbses and Tank Bigsby's of the world, but I think this, him and guys like Byron Cardwell, are kind of not talked about as much because they don't have the recruiting stars. But yeah, I like him. I think I like that pick.
Yeah, I actually have him as a top 12 overall running back, so I'm probably one of the highest on Kendre here. But I do think I agree with you. Like, him and a couple of the other 23 running backs are being swept under the rug because they're not Bijan Robinson and even Zach Evans or whoever. And so it's just like you said, he, at the very least, I think he did similar things that Zach Evans did, and now Evans transfers, and all of a sudden he's this stud. And don't get me wrong, I love Zach Evans, so I'm not trying to downplay him by any means. I just don't really understand why a player that did very similar things on the same exact offense isn't getting the same amount of love.
Yeah, I'm with you.
So those are our favorite players for the Big 12. And now let's go ahead and get into one that we think will that's not quite getting enough love as of right now. I'll go ahead and start off, and it's become another one that another running back that I'm falling in love with, and it's somebody who had a very small sample size last year, and so it might be a very under the radar name. It's Tay McWilliams out of Baylor, but when you consider everything that's changed on that offense, and the fact that they lost 2,850 scrimmage yards are now vacated, and I'm doing air quotes, but from last year with Abram Smith and Treston Ebner both leaving and going to the NFL. And all of a sudden it's Tay McWilliams' game. It's Tay McWilliams' ball. And so he did not do very much last year because he didn't really have an opportunity with those two guys ahead of him. But when he did, he put up 10 yards per rush. He did some pretty big things, and now he's the starter. He's getting some hype out of spring camp and hopefully now even getting into fall camp and things like that. Once again, going to the actual metrics, I was talking about how Kendre Miller had 1.4 PPR points per touch. Well, Tay McWilliams, once again in a very small sample size, had 1.8 points per PPR points per touch, and so that just kind of shows you the explosiveness, the exciting nature of his game, and what he could be if given a full workload. And so that's why I think that he will easily rise and become much more than what he's being valued at right now.
I like Tay. That whole offense is completely different. They obviously lose Bohannon to USF. They lose Tyquan Thornton to the NFL, who's the leading receiver, and then you already touched on both the running backs. But they love to run the ball. Like you said, what'd you say? Over 2,000 rushing yards.
2,850 scrimmage yards. I think it was 2,400 rushing yards that are gone.
You want that RB1, and it seems like it's going to be Tay McWilliams. I also like Squirrel Williams as a late C2C pick. He's going to be the RB2 there. He's a little bit cheaper because I think everyone's kind of assuming that Tay is going to be the RB1 there, which I agree. I think he will be as well. I think the offense is going to look a little better with Blake Shapen at quarterback. So I think, I think all the arrows are pointing up for Tay McWilliams. I like the pick quite a lot, actually.
Yeah, I really do think he's going to rise. And as far as his size, he's 6'1", 211 as of right now. He is going to his junior year, so he's probably not going to get much bigger, I would assume. But maybe he can get up to like that 215 range. And then if he does big things this year, we could be talking about him in like, third, fourth round, something like that, which – I mean, think about all the names that went in the third, fourth round of the NFL draft this year that people are getting excited about, as far as the running backs.
Yeah, and that's all we really want in Devy is like for them to retain some sort of value when getting to the NFL. So if they get draft capital, as far as I'm concerned, especially if it's a deep Devy league like this, where a league where you're drafting Tay McWilliams probably in like the 10+ round, like a C2C league essentially. That's a hit, I think, if you get a NFL draft capital for that. So yeah, totally.
I agree. So who do you have as your player that will rise?
All right, so I also went running back. I went to Oklahoma State though and took Dominic Richardson, 6 feet, 210 pounds. OK State loses Jalen Warren to the NFL, who rushed for 1,200 yards last year. So we think Richardson's going to take over for that coveted RB1 role in the Mike Gundy offense. If you look just looking back at like the RB1s for Oklahoma State, you had Chuba Hubbard, Justice Hill, Chris Carson, and then before that was Tyreek Hill, if you can believe that. So guys that are in the NFL or, even Justice Hill, he hasn't done anything, but he was still a late second round rookie pick in 2019. So all these guys are getting to the NFL and making differences. So you want this RB1. Obviously, Jalen Warren, I think, went undrafted, but he's still on an NFL roster. He has the size, like you said, you'd like to see him up around 215. So he's very similar to Jalen Warren, I think, analytically. Warren was a better tackle breaker, but Richardson has a slight edge once they get into that second level. Not a huge threat at receiver, but not a complete zero either. So he'll still probably catch like 20 and 25 balls. And I think this, based on the historical precedence of Oklahoma State running backs, I think it's day 3 draft capital is within that range of outcomes.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. Like you said, I mean, he put up very similar metrics and stats as Warren. He just didn't get quite the run that Warren got, obviously. So maybe the receiving part of the game, needs a little help. But it was a small sample, so who knows? Maybe he can grow if he actually does become the lead back there. But he put up very similar numbers and everything. He just only had 79 rushing attempts last year. So if he can get that full workload, then I definitely agree that he could rise in value for sure. So we've done quite a bit of agreeing the past few pods, to the point of even some of our listeners possibly, being like, come on guys, like you got to disagree every once in a while, that kind of thing. I think once we get into these next few players, even getting into the ACC, that there's going to be a little bit of discourse. So I'm going to let you go ahead and see. This is a little unfair because I know who your pick is. You don't know who my pick is.
Okay.
But I'm gonna go ahead and let you do your blasphemous pick here, and then and then we'll dive into mine.
All right. Well, so my player in the Big 12 that I think will lose value is Xavier Worthy, wide receiver out of Texas.
Blasphemy.
So I don't need to
absolute blasphemy.
Let me defend my honor here. So obviously we know he had the massive freshman campaign, 981 yards, ridiculous, 2.84 yards per team pass attempt. He's currently going ADP of 11 as wide receiver 3. So I don't hate Worthy. I just want to say that right out of the get-go. He's a true freshman breakout on a Power 5 team, and the hit rates for those are massive. But I think what we're doing right now is drafting him at his ceiling. For him to gain value, he's going to need to match those numbers or best them, which I don't know if that's possible. He took advantage of a great opportunity, which you want good players to do. I'm not saying, he didn't deserve what he did. He obviously, was given the opportunity and he took advantage of it. But Jordan Whittington missed a third of the season. Troy O'Meara didn't play at all again. He was supposed to be, a starting wide receiver as well. Both of those guys are presumably healthy. They also bring in Isaiah Neyor, who, if you want to talk about like ridiculous market shares, that guy was at like 60% at Wyoming last year. They bring in a Guy Hall from Alabama, another high 5-star, Jaleel Billingsley from Alabama. They also have 4-star wide receiver Brendan Thompson. So I just feel like the opportunity is going to go down there. And you're going to have a better quarterback too. You're going to, Quinn Ewers is not going to just be focusing in on one guy. So I think this ADP does slide back. I'm not going to say he's going to just he's not going to tank his value. He's not going to end up being like a 4th-round pick or anything. But like mid to back end of the second, kind of like, the Marvin Mims slide from a year ago where, he went like 3/4 of a round back from where he was going in 2021. So that's all I'm really getting at. I wanted to try and keep it reasonable. I'm not saying the guy's going to suck, but I don't think he has anywhere to go upwards. He can only really go backwards.
No, you absolutely hate Xavier Worthy. I can hear it in your voice.
He's tiny. He's like 160 pounds.
He is very tiny, and unfortunately, I don't think he has a lot of room to grow either. Like, I don't think all of a sudden he's going to be like 180, 190 pounds or anything like that.
No.
He is extremely tiny, but it's kind of weird when a guy is that good as a freshman and then gets a QB upgrade to assume that he's going to lose value. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Now don't get me wrong, I do love some Isaiah Neyor. I really do. I just got done talking about him on my other pod and how I drafted him, and I'm so excited to have him on my squad. I think that they can be a very good complement, but I think it's because they got a QB upgrade, and so I don't think it's necessarily going to hurt anyone. You can get the hell out of here with a Guy Hall. Like he couldn't make it out of Alabama, even get on the field. Like it wasn't like they had like 5 stud wide receivers last year that like he couldn't possibly get out there or anything like that. And I mean, he's kicked off the team. I honestly, beyond like people, Devy analysts, I have not heard his name mentioned by like anyone. I don't even know if he's actually on the team at this point. So
I think he was running with like the 2nd or 3rd team offense last.
I get it. He's a 5-star prospect and all that kind of stuff, but I feel like at this point, it's been how many years and how much time has been spent on like talking about him. I think that there was much better arguments that you made before you started talking about a guy.
I just had to mention him. His name was on the list too.
I get it. Like I think anytime that you're at the top, with like I have Worthy very high, and considering his weight, maybe I probably even need to drop him a little bit, just because I don't care about weight. It doesn't bother me that he's 160 pounds, but the NFL might, and even more so, my Devy league mates might, or definitely will. And so like if he doesn't have value because of that, or as much value because of that, then I kind of have to drop him a little bit. But as a player, the dude's a freaking stud, and so like I'm having fun with you here. It is blasphemy, but I get what you're saying at the same time. The funny thing is, I'm doing basically the same thing, and so I'm going with probably what you would, or a lot of people would consider a blasphemous take as well. I'm talking about like one of the top players, and it's Quentin Johnston. I really do think that when it's all said and done, he's going to lose a little bit of value. Once again, like you said, I don't think he's going to like all of a sudden suck and be considered the wide receiver 50 or anything like that. But I just think that for whatever reason, people are kind of like overhyping what TCU is going to do this year and what all is going to happen. But when you actually look at what he's done and not even worry so much about the actual like offense in general, he hasn't been amazing. He's been good, but he's being drafted as the wide receiver 3 in the 2023 class right now, and I just don't have him there. I have him as my wide receiver 6 in that class, and that's probably much lower than most people. But I think when it's all said and done, he's probably going to move down a little bit closer to that, and some other guys will end up moving up. When the other thing is, even if he doesn't necessarily move down in the positional ranks, he's being drafted 15th overall in Devy drafts right now, and I think he could drop in that value in like the overall drafts. So you might start seeing some running backs or QBs or whoever moving up ahead of him when it's all said and done. The thing that for me, and obviously this is when we start getting a little nerdier and all that kind of stuff, but like if you look at the top wide receivers, like the best wide receivers, like the Xavier Worthies, the JSNs, the Keyshawn Bouttes, like those kind of guys, they're looking at like 3 yards per team pass attempt, like something right around there. Like that's what you're looking for with those stud wide receivers. Quentin Johnston, in his best season, has a 1.98 yards per team pass attempt. That's not terrible, but it's not like amazing. It's not anything that you're going to like write home to mom about or anything like that. The other thing that you were talking about is Isaiah Nair and how he had like almost a 60% market share on his of receiving yards. That's another thing that I look at for receivers. And like the top guys are closer to like 35-40% generally speaking. Like once again, the JSNs, the Xavier Worthies, those guys. He's at Quentin Johnston's at 24.8% for his best season. He's at like 20.4% for his average over the history of his college career. So while those, once again, are not terrible numbers, they're not stud numbers. They're not the wide receiver 3 in the class numbers, like that kind of thing. So he either has to take a big step forward, and it has nothing to do with the rest of his team. That's him as a player, as a prospect. He has to take a step forward and become better, or he's just going to be a good prospect that probably should not be your wide receiver 3 in the class.
Yeah, I'm with you that wide receiver 3 is too high. I don't know if he's going to lose value though. I mean, I don't think he's wide receiver 3, but like for me, I have him at wide receiver 5 personally in the 2023 class. And I think he will still be wide receiver 5 for me at the end of the year, potentially higher if he has a big year. I know there's talk about DJ Allen and Jordan Hudson, being decent this year, which would be great. But I don't know if Quentin Johnston's really had like a competent quarterback yet. Max Duggan, it sounds like he's not going to be the starter this year. Chandler Morris is going to win that job. So maybe that changes some things. But yeah, it's so hard because he's like Quentin Johnston's so athletic. He's got the size. He's got the recruiting stars. I just feel like he's got everything he needs to be a successful player. He just needs to put those numbers out on the field. So yeah, I guess I am kind of disagreeing with you. I do think that wide receiver 3 is too high because right off the bat, obviously Keyshawn Boutte, JSN, Jordan Addison. I've got Josh Downs ahead of him. I know some people might not agree with that, but I think Quentin Johnston's good though. He just needs to put together like a solid year here, and he could potentially, be a first-round pick.
That's why I wanted to focus on those two particular stats, because those have nothing to do with how good your QB is or anything like that. Those are wide receiver stats,
you're right about the yards per team pass attempt, 1.9. It's a little low, but it's still above that threshold. He does need to improve this year. Like in his third season, he does need to go above 2. But I'm not overly concerned yet.
No, I'm not concerned. Like I once again, I think he's my wide receiver 6. So like I'm not concerned about him. I'm happy to have him on my team. I'm not drafting him at 15th overall in wide receiver 3. That's for damn sure.
Yeah, no, I'm with you there.
All right, so that is it for our players that will lose value. That's it for the Big 12. Let's go ahead and take a little break, and then we will dive into the ACC, and we'll go ahead and do the same thing there as well.
I am going to stand by my fact that I think that if Cam Akers plays the entire season, I don't see a reason why he's not in the top 5 at the end of the year. On a good offense, he will catch 40 passes if he's the starting running back. I really believe that. And 10 to 13 touchdowns full season, that's going to put him in top 5 contention. I'm sticking with that. I think that will be the play. you're right. We're going to save that for the quintessential training camp note.
Training camp. You gotta love it. At least we're getting some actual news and stuff like that. But the training camp hype and like I said, you gotta love it. Let's go ahead and dive into the ACC here, and we'll start off with our favorite player. And here's the good news. We do agree on this one because we both have the same favorite player. And
nice.
Andy can go ahead and start us off with who we picked.
Well, I already mentioned him talking about Quentin Johnston, and that's Josh Downs. He went off as a true sophomore, 40% market share, 3.5 yards per team pass attempt. Absolute yak machine. I get Jarvis Landry vibes from him. His sophomore year was very reminiscent of Landry's junior season at LSU. I talked about him at length, I believe it was a couple episodes ago, so I'm not going to get too into the weeds here. But he's just so dynamic after the catch. So, like, Drake May, even if it ends up being like Jacoby Criswell as the quarterback there, you don't need to be like have crazy arm talent to make this guy successful. You just need to get him the ball. He's going to get open in space. And he's going to get you 9 or 10 yards after the catch every single time he catches it. So he's a little undersized. We're talking about Xavier Worthy and laughing at him for being 160. Josh Downs is sitting there at 170. But I just feel like, he's got that skill set. He's going to be a pure slot receiver in the NFL, which tends to have like a longer, shelf life. It's not out of the question that he puts up, multiple hundred catch seasons in the NFL and, plays like 8 to 10 years and is a wide receiver 2, sometimes wide receiver 1 from time to time. So yeah, I love Josh Downs. I'm taking him wherever I can get him.
I really don't have much to add. I love the player. I'm very high on him. He's my wide receiver 3 in the class, in the 2023 class. So like if I was drafting someone at wide receiver 3, it would not be Quentin Johnston. It would be Josh Downs. And I don't know how much you can trust it or not, but he's actually being listed at 5'10", 180 now on sportsreference.com. So
I'll take that.
I will definitely take that. But the thing is, I don't I don't truly care. I'm not the size guy. People were freaking out about Devontae Smith because he was so small and all that. And Devontae Smith's just a stud. Xavier Worthy's just a stud. Josh Downs is just a stud. But even then, like 180 pounds or even like 175 pounds is plenty big enough as far as I'm concerned for a wide receiver. I get that they're not going to be the dominant TO or anything like that. Like obviously that's never going to be Josh Downs, but what he's doing on like not even the best offense. I mean, think about what North Carolina did last year, and yet he still ended up with 100 or 1,335 yards and 8 touchdowns. Like when you consider the passing offense and what it was, that's pretty damn good.
Yeah, because they had nobody else. And you're right about like wide receiver size, especially this day in the NFL. It's really not as important as, other positions. So I'm with you. Like 170 to 180, I'm not really freaking out about it. Especially like we're talking about, he's a slot receiver. He's going to, be creating space. He's not going to be taking those big hits, you hope.
Exactly. I think that we are definitely in agreement here, but unfortunately, we are going to get into a little bit more blasphemy a little bit later on. But not on this one.
Right.
But not on this one. Let's go and dive into our players who will go up in value. And I'll start off here. And my player is Dontavian Wicks, wide receiver out of Virginia. Actually, we both chose Virginia. Or no, you chose Virginia Tech. Never mind. We both chose the state of Virginia. But Dontavian Wicks missed all of 2021. Correct? Yes. No. 2020. Yeah, he missed all of 2020 because of an injury, but then played all of last year. 57 receptions, 1,203 yards, 9 touchdowns, and he's being drafted as the wide receiver 33, at least in ADP. I have him as my wide receiver 19. Like, I get it, he's older, because of missing that time in 2020. Obviously, he wasn't able to come out last year, but I think that he's going to just replicate what he did last year, or possibly even get better this year. And the NFL is going to have to pay attention at that point. Obviously, if he can stay healthy and do all that, I'm not saying he's a stud. I'm not saying he's going to, be a round one prospect or anything like that. But I do think he could be, a third, fourth round pick, that kind of thing, and possibly, or at the very least, be drafted in the NFL. And being drafted as wide receiver 33 right now, that's probably not all that that's not the expectation, at least when you're looking at that ADP. Sorry, am I putting you to sleep here, buddy?
Yeah. No, I'm just pulling up some stuff, but yeah, I like Dontavian Wicks. I like Brennan Armstrong as like a college quarterback. He's going to really sling the ball around and get, all his receivers some points. They have another guy on the team, Lavelle Davis, who is kind of in the same situation as Dontavian Wicks was, where he had a big 2020 and then missed 2021. So it was kind of they flip-flopped. Now they're both healthy. And they also have Keaton Thompson, who's, a decent player. Billy Kemp, who's going to get 400 or 500 yards too. So I just don't know what that market share is going to shape out to look like, because I do like Lavelle Davis. He's coming off that ACL. But you're right. I mean, Dontavian Wicks had a breakout year last year. I think this is going to be his fourth season out of high school. So he's not like a super senior or anything. And I do think wide receiver 33 is a little low for him. So like I said, Brennan Armstrong is going to be slinging the ball around. I think there's plenty of food to go around for everybody to eat. So, I'm with you. I like Dontavian Wicks as a nice late round guy to potentially, get day 2 draft capital.
Yeah, and if you are a sizeist, he's 6'1", 210. So there you go. There's some size for you.
I like it.
Who do you got as your riser?
All right, so I went with Malachi Thomas, who is a running back for Virginia Tech. True freshman last year. He had 440 yards on 93 carries, a little undersized, 6 feet, just under 200 pounds. And I do think that becomes an issue for him, when he's breaking tackles and creating yards after contact. I tweeted about him earlier in the year back in like spring camps, and his offensive coordinator has been talking him up. Seems like he's going to be the RB1 there. Obviously, Raheem Blackshear is no longer with the team. He's in the NFL. But also Braxton Burmeister, who was their quarterback last year, who was second in the team in rushing. I think he had over 500 yards rushing as well. He's out of town now. He transferred to, I want to say, San Jose State. But they bring in a more traditional pocket passer in Grant Wells, who came in from Marshall. So I think the offense in general is going to look more traditional. So I think, they're going to rely more on the running game. And he's not like he's not a complete zero in the pass game either. He's going to catch some balls. So I could see him breaking 1,000 all-purpose yards. And if he does that, he's, like I said, he's a true sophomore this year. So if he, has a breakout year, he's going to be on some draft boards in the top, 5 or 6 rounds next year.
Yeah, I like it. I honestly don't know a lot about the player. I'm probably going to look more into him. Some of these guys just get lost in the ranks. You kind of like hyper target certain players, and then others you just like I said, that you just kind of get lost in like the middle rounds and everything. But I liked everything that you said about him.
Yeah. I mean, especially when you're getting the ACC here, it's not as deep as some of these other leagues. So you're just trying to find like, all right, well, who could potentially break out? So
yeah, no, I definitely like it. And I think, when you're looking for that, it's easy to go to the running back position and just say like, who has the best opportunity, whether it's they already have the job or they could get the job with an injury or whatever. So I like it. Now we're going to get a little bit of contention here with a player who will lose value. I'm going to go ahead and let you start with yours so that I can yell at you and tell you why you're wrong.
All right. Well, I think it was one of the earlier episodes of the Tommy T where I talked about how bad the Devy community is at predicting quarterbacks and like projecting them into success in the NFL. We're pretty horrible at it. Well, that's why I'm talking about Tyler Van Dyke today, because he's the guy that the Devy community says is the next, first round quarterback, yada, yada, yada. But traditionally, like, we miss on like 3 out of 5 of the guys that we think are going to make it as NFL quarterbacks. This last year, we missed on DJU, we missed on Spencer Rattler, we missed on Sam Howell. I wouldn't call Malik Willis a miss because he wasn't like drafted in the top 2 or 3 rounds, but we missed on him. We missed on everybody. We didn't hit anything. The only one that made it as a first round draft pick was Kenny Pickett, and he wasn't even getting taken in like the first 30 rounds of C2C drafts. So we're bad at it. We're bad at picking quarterbacks, and I don't think that we figured it out in the last year. But he's QB8 right now, ADP 38, so he's a early 4th round draft pick. They lose Charleston Rambo. He gets 2 of the more conservative coaches. Now I know that Josh Gaddis, the offensive coordinator, wasn't as conservative when he when he coached for Alabama. He was obviously a lot more conservative with Michigan, but I think that was more of the Harbaugh thing. And he also brings in his head coach, Cristobal, who at Oregon obviously liked to run the ball as well. So all of this just kind of leads me to believe that, if I have to pick one of the guys that the Devy community is wrong on at quarterback, Tyler Van Dyke is probably one of those guys. So I'm staying away from him. I don't have any Tyler Van Dyke. I'll just put that disclaimer out right now. But I did consider drafting him at some points, but he got taken right before I sniped on him. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with him.
So once again, it's just complete blasphemy, just spewing from your mouth. But I think we were talking about Jackson Dart earlier and how, like, in the Pac-12, he couldn't even get 7 yards adjusted yards per attempt. And then, you look at Tyler Van Dyke in the ACC, which, isn't the SEC, but it's definitely a lot better than the Pac-12, a lot stronger than the Pac-12. He's 9.8 yards or adjusted yards per attempt, 25 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, 160 passer rate, like a lot of those things that you're looking for. And I actually consider myself to be a pretty good, QB whisperer or whatever you want to call it. And so, like, while yes, when you're only looking at one season with Tyler Van Dyke, it's impossible for me to guarantee that he's going to be the next stud. Obviously I would have loved to have played in 2020 or, even have an extra year or whatever. But I think we're going to find that out this year. I get the concerns with the coaching and that kind of thing. But when certain things that I look for, especially like one of the biggest things I look for with QB evaluation is the interception rate. And that's one of the reasons why I don't like a Jackson Dart, because his interception rate was through the roof, like up in like the 3-4%, whereas Tyler Van Dyke is at 1.8%. They're like very, very viable, percentage there. Like, he's safe with the ball while putting up touchdowns, good completion rate, good adjusted yards per attempt, an 80.1 QBR, which, like, that's what you want to see. When I'm looking at QBs, I want to see QBs that are up in the 80s for QBR. Anything below that starts getting a little iffy. Not saying they can't hit, but that's really what I'm looking for, is those QBs in the 80s. Other QBs in the 80s, CJ Stroud at 87.9, Bryce Young at 86.6, Sam Howell was at a 78.3, Matt Corral was at 83.2 last year. So that just shows you that, like, he's right in that range with those other guys as far as QBR. And then same thing with like the passer rating. A lot of those top guys are in the 160s, 170s, like that kind of thing. The top guys were CJ Stroud and Bryce Young were at 189 and 183, and then we have Tyler Van Dyke at 160.1. So obviously I would much rather see a larger sample, but I think everything that he did last year showed that he deserves another shot. So I get it. Like, any of these QBs can lose value. And if that's your main point, then I'm perfectly fine with it, But if you're specifically pointing out Tyler Van Dyke as the one that's going to lose value, then I feel like there's other QBs that I would focus on. Uh-oh, are you muted?
I was just gonna say, DJU already lost all his value, so I couldn't take him.
Well, yeah, I mean, but the thing with DJU was a small sample. Like Tyler Van Dyke had basically an entire season to show us that like he was good. DJU, everyone got excited because of like what 2 or 3 games, 4 games, whatever it was, and then obviously just everything changed after that. I'm also not completely giving up on DJU, but he's very low in the ranks. He's nowhere close to Tyler Van Dyke at this point, so I get what you're saying.
All right, well, who do you got here?
So I have this is another one where we're going to be fighting because you just talked about him on a previous pod. I have let's see if I can go ahead and pronounce his name this time. Israel Abanaconda as my player that will lose value here. And honestly, like I said, we just talked about it. Was it the last pod or the pod before that? So I don't think we have to get into like
it was just a player profile I did on him, but yeah.
Yeah, we were talking about some of the players that were replacing other players, I believe, and I don't see it. I just don't really see it. I don't think he's ever going to be anything special. I don't think he's going to be. I don't think he's an NFL talent. I'm much lower on him than obviously Andy and even the Devy community. But I think when it's all said and done, people are going to realize that he's just not special, and that he's probably not going to be like an NFL back, and he's going to lose value.
Oof. All right, we're going to have to clip that because I think you're wrong. Like there was like a 3-headed monster there last year, so I think he comes out on top and like lead. Especially now with Keaton Slovis there, they're going to be running a lot more now without Kenny Pickett. And he was definitely the best running back on that team. So I think you're wrong. We'll see, though.
I'm trying to see where I have him because I actually did move him up my ranks recently, but I don't even think he necessarily moved up. Oops, I'm messing up things now. Let me see if I can get
back. It's not very,
to...
like, his ADP's just in the top 100, like in the 80th range, like RB 30 or something.
Yeah, I'm trying to find it. I have him as my Israel RB 58 in Devy. Yeah. So that just goes to show you how I feel about it.
Yeah, I mean that's pretty low. We'll see.
Yeah, like so we'll clip it. We'll clip it. We'll come back to it mid-year. We'll see how right I was about Van Dyke, about Xavier Worthy, about all of them, and then Andy can go ahead and we'll figure out a punishment. Yeah, we'll figure out a punishment for him for sure.
Hey, but real quick before we go, I just want to mention that the Dynasty Walkabout is going to have a full show dedicated to trades you can make to improve your team before the preseason value collapses. So pay attention for that on Saturday. Tilt, or not the full tilt, but there's the Dynasty Walkabout. So Tom Lee and Tom should be holding it down there.
That's right, and that'll be on Saturday. So make sure you check that out and all the other Full Tilt Dynasty Podcast Network podcasts, which we are proud to be a member of the True North Dynasty Podcast Network. And all that, but we appreciate you guys listening. We actually had a little bit more that we were going to dive into, some preseason notes and stuff like that, but we went a little long, so we'll go ahead and save that for next time. I want to end it on me being right and Andy being wrong there, so we'll definitely we'll get into. Yeah, TV. That's very true. It's TBD. We'll go ahead and get into more next time. I think we're going to go ahead and continue on to some other conferences, like possibly the SEC. Maybe even some of the lesser conferences as well. And we'll start getting into some of the players that we love with those as well. But we'll be back in 2 weeks, and we'll talk to you then. But for now, we're going to go ahead and cash out. See you guys.
See ya.